And so we've got 3 panelists. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I'm Rob Capra from UNC Chapel Hill. I've been working in the interactive IR space for a long time now. And this past sort of February and March, you just could not stop me from jumping up and down with excitement about all the changes that were coming to our field due to generative AI. And so if any of you guys ran into me at the Cheer conference this year, you probably knew that I could not stop professing how our field is changing and this is an exciting time and all of that. So here we are, 8 or so months later, and I still feel that way. Things are still changing on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. I've had people telling me things that have been happening this past week that I missed out on. And so that's the time we live in. So all of this, I hope, will be a sense to give us some directions to be thinking in and some broader topics to be focusing on as we move forward. A few of the topics that I had circulated out here to the panel overlap with some of the things that we talked about during our breakout session today. So you may hear some familiar themes, but I think that's a good, healthy thing. So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves. Then I've got a handful of questions that I'm going to pose to them, and then we're going to open it up for you guys to barrage them with questions. And you know what makes a good, interesting panel session is if people say controversial things. So that could either be them or you, right? So hopefully we'll have some good, I'm not thinking of anybody in particular. All right, so without any further ado, I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves.
I'm Besmira. I work on responsible AI. More specifically, I've worked on building tools for responsible AI, basically development frameworks that take what we build in research and take them to developers, to machine learning engineers, so that they can use them in their day-to-day work and basically accelerate the whole process. Now, as we're thinking about the new, the next generation of such tools, there are old challenges and there are new challenges. So the more controversial opinion in this space is that, at the core, the responsible AI challenges have not changed in the sense that, what was fundamental about doing disaggregated evaluating across different population groups and not reporting a single number, really understanding, the transparency of the model and interpreting, what kinds of things it's using to make a prediction. These things remain at the core of it. And so in many ways, sort of my job has not changed. But the scale of it changes, though. The amount of things that you need to accelerate and think about has increased a lot. And on top of all this, it seems like with all these new emergent abilities that we're being excited every day, we're lagging behind on evaluation and understanding of how such models behave. And that is basically what is keeping us busy right now, working on a general evaluation, as general as you can get, right, of these frameworks for evaluation and understanding.
Great, thank you.
What's your affiliation?
Oh, I'm at Microsoft Research. Yeah, I work in this building.
Okay, hi. So I am Jacek Gwizdka from UT Austin School of Information. And kind of similarly to Rob, I've been working in the space of interactive information retrieval for well over 15 years, probably more like 2 decades, especially in the context of task-based search and considering task complexity as one of the factors. I'm still fascinated and very positive, I would reveal at this point, in the possibilities offered by the generative AI. I'm not coming from the AI background, I'm coming from human factors, interactive information retrieval, HCI perspective, user interface design to this space. Looking forward to controversies.
Hi, I'm Leif. I'm from the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow for part of the time. And then I've also been visiting Microsoft as well as a visiting scientist working with Nick actually on Office 365 and the search and recommendations on that space. So it's kind of been fun taking theory and looking at about how that works in practice and looking at how we can evaluate search technology. So evaluation is one of my core strengths. And thinking about how we can make systems better to empower people, right, so they get the most value out of those systems. And so that sort of segues into using sort of, or thinking about the economics or what the value proposition is when we interact with a system, we're giving something or we're trying to get something from that system. And so we can think about using economic theory in order to describe the interactions and also thinking about how we can use that to measure and evaluate those systems. And so bringing it around to like this discussion with generative AI, we start now having this very, very different context where we're not just grunting to a system. Like, you think about it, like we were pretty primitive. Like, we just grunt to the search engine and expect it to know magically what we want. And now we're changing that value proposition. We're saying, tell us more specifically what you desire, what you need to know, or what you want, and we'll magically give you the answer in a different form. And so the economics of this changes. But it also opens up some really interesting possibilities. So Jacek has already mentioned tasks, and Grace and Luan has talked about tasks already. And I think this is kind of a fundamental thing. But I was like looking around the research and thinking, well, what are tasks? Like, what are the tasks people want to do? We know people go to search engines, and we know they find information, but what do they do with it? Why are they looking for this information, right? And so I was like going, okay, so I go to the search engine, I find some information, and their task is navigational, informational, transactional, that's it. That's the best we can do. But now we have this opportunity because people are actually saying to the system, this is what I want, right? And not being just what I want to find, this is what I want to know, and maybe this is what I want to use it for, and this is the decision I want to make out of it. And so now we have this like great opportunity to learn what the tasks that people really want to do are from AI.
All right, thank you. All right, so the first question is the softball question, I think. So we've been doing task-based stuff for a long time. We're trying to do task-based IR for a long time. I was talking with some people earlier today, and I was trying to remember if it was 2009 that we had the NSF task-based workshop in Chapel Hill. Diane Kelly ran with us. 2013. Okay, so 10 years ago. All right, so we've been talking
Rob
about
said
this.
he was prone to hallucinations.
I am prone to hallucinations. Luan did a great job of introducing us to the history of thinking about tasks in IR. And so my question to you all, the panel, is that, given all these capabilities and limitations that we know generative AI has right now, how can we integrate it into support for tasks that people are trying to do? And how can we do that in such a way that it's going to support users, and what challenges are we going to encounter?
Which one was the easy one?
That was the easy one, yes.
That's the baseline now.
Yeah.
Imagine what comes.
Well, just a quick clarification here. Like, as the information retrieval community gets closer to the machine learning community, there are some clarifications that need to be made in place. For the ML community, entity recognition is a task. Mm-hmm. And which human in the world has a goal, an objective in their mind that they want to recognize an entity? And so but we call it task, right? And other things like this that are very, very fine-grained and so on, or sentiment analysis is a task. But that is actually not what, going to what you were describing, is not what the user wants to achieve. So first, I guess we need a definition of what is a task that has some real-world value to what the user is going to achieve.
I think that's a great starting point. It has real-world value to the user.
And don't okay. I have other thoughts, but
it's gonna be a fun day, folks.
Okay, so going to that end, if we define that this has a real-world usage, then it means that we also need to provide real-world context to solving that task. In that, if you ask GPT-4 today, you can write a lot of like specifications, and yes, it's good in following those specifications, but it doesn't have the context about like what my life is, like which people I talk to. If I wanted to reply my email, it needs to know a lot about what is my relationship to that person I'm replying to, and like what is the history and all that. So it feels like getting really, really good at providing that context window to the language model is what is going to be like the key factor in enabling actual tasks. And that is not easy. And it's a retrieval problem, like, where you get it from.
Yeah, so that's where, like if you're thinking about it in the organizational context where you'll have all these sort of co-pilots circling around you. Is that the right metaphor? And having access to your data, knowing that you've been writing this document or the trajectory of emails with your conversation with your friends or your colleagues, then there are now the possibilities for it to do a better job at contextually responding to your emails. But is that what you really want it to do? So your system responds to the email to me, and then my system responds to the email to you, and then it thinks that's a great response, and then your system then responds back to me, right?
What do we do in the meantime?
What do we do? Right, and so we have this, so it's your language model talks to my language model, and then we'll do lunch, right? And it's like, what happens in this universe is it just all these different order effects, right? And that's what we have like this amazing space where we have first order documents, people the ones that people have made, and then we'll have a whole series of second order documents, ones generated by the AI. Are they real documents? Are they real in any sense, or should we attribute any reality to them? In our group earlier, Luann brought up the point of, feel free to chime in whenever, is about authorship. Who is the author of one of these documents? Sorry to segue, I think I'm turning a corner here. Which is, who is the author of these documents? Is it the language model? Is it its responsibility for it to produce? Or is it the person who put in the prompt, or the context in this case of all our previous emails, which would then generate the next utterance?
So task. So in the information science, there's a notion of work task, which is sitting located above search task and way above any of the smaller tasks that you describe from a computer science perspective. So how the system can learn, and is it by agents conversing between themselves, or how we prompt user to do this? So this is, I think, question for the user interface, and so I want to play with something, and that is so I considered what, where, and when how we can in engaging large language models in the process of information search and retrieval, where can it take place and how it can be possibly expressed and implemented in user interface. So if you bear with me, I will switch the microphone to my computer speaker and try to do this. And it will be obvious who provided this answer.
ChatGPT. I can assist in multiple phases of the information search process, each with different degrees of support depending on the specificity and complexity of the task at hand. Here's a breakdown of how I could assist across various phases of the information search process. Identifying information needs. Help clarify and articulate information needs by asking probing questions. Assist in refining vague or broad queries into more precise information needs. Query formulation. Suggest alternative phrasing or keywords to improve query effectiveness. Provide guidance on advanced search operators to refine queries. Help in structuring complex queries. Search strategy development. Provide advice on developing a systematic search strategy. Offer suggestions on where to search for specific types of information. Advise on the use of different search tools and techniques. Execution of searches. While I can't perform real-time searches, I can generate examples of how to execute searches based on prior knowledge. Provide guidance on utilizing various search platforms and databases. Evaluation of search results. Offer criteria and strategies for evaluating the credibility, relevance, and accuracy of search results. Help in comparing and contrasting information from different sources. Provide guidelines for assessing the reliability and reputation of sources. Synthesis of information. Assist in summarizing, organizing, and synthesizing information. Offer guidance on how to draw connections between disparate pieces of information. Help in understanding complex information and translating it into actionable insights. Refinement and iteration. Assist in refining search strategies based on the evaluation of search results. Provide suggestions for further searches to fill in information gaps. Offer guidance on iterative searching to progressively meet information needs. Documenting and reporting. Provide templates or structures for documenting the search process and findings. Offer guidance on citing sources and maintaining a
there a
record of
token
search
limit?
strategies. Evaluating the search process. Help in reflecting on the effectiveness of the search process. Provide strategies for improving future search efforts based on lessons learned. Knowledge building and sharing. Assist in turning search findings into knowledge assets. Offer suggestions for sharing and disseminating findings with others. Throughout these phases, I can serve as a support tool for brainstorming, problem solving, and knowledge building, though the actual searching, evaluation, and verification of real-time information would need to be conducted by the human user.
So is it
That's all?
is it overconfident or is it right on the spot?
It sounds like the perfect PhD student. No, like,
So there was a lot of overlap in its answers there. It hit verification and credibility at least 3 times.
Well, it's important.
Yeah.
Do we trust this answer?
Well,
It's like a
How do
job
we-
applicant, right? These are my skills, I can do all of it.
Yeah, job applicants aren't usually that confident, though.
But you interview them, they could be.
What was the query that you gave to get this?
well, so this was part of conversation. So first I started with a prompt that Rob started this section of the panel. And then I kept asking it in which phases of information search process you could offer help and what would it be. And then I continued where in the user interface this kind of help could be located.
Well, shouldn't the answer be that it should be everywhere in the user interface? And that, like, right now we have this limited view that every AI is a chatbot. Like, if there is no chatbot, there is no AI. And this is more prevalent than we'd think. Like, I was hearing the other day somebody giving like a presentation to a VC in the Bay Area, and they were like very confused because whatever they were presenting didn't have a chat window. And they were like, well, where is the AI? Like, I don't see it. And kind of, this is, a transitionary phase in the sense that, yes, like the easiest form is to have a chatbot, but shouldn't it be everywhere in where the user interacts? And everywhere is like an overstatement, obviously, but shouldn't it be a little bit more distributed than where we see it right now?
Possibly, yes. And I think this points us into the direction of extending user interfaces beyond single box, single entry box. And there has been tons of work in the IIR or IR area. And it's pretty much never made it to the mainstream.
and my argument would be is just it costs too much for a user to type in all that stuff to the system, right? Why would they want to go to all that extra effort when they can just point and click?
But if there's a payoff,
Yeah, that's right. So the payoff has to be worthwhile, right? Of course, you can just talk to the system as well, right? That would be an easier way to express your needs in a sort of very cost-effective manner to get an answer, right? But if you have to explain in excruciating detail exactly what you want, it might just be easier to write a search and then find it. So the complexity of the task that it has to perform has to be sort of sufficiently great enough that it would maybe take you 5-10 minutes to do it manually versus you expressing it in, say, a minute and then getting the response, right? Assuming that you can express your need to the system sufficiently articulated so that it will deliver the answer that you want the first time around and you don't have to do several refinements of your prompt, right?
Leif, you're proposing that there's a certain class of tasks or problems that are going to be really well suited to this because we can describe them efficiently and the machine can produce based on that efficient notation.
Yeah.
And then there's maybe another class that's not.
Yeah, so let's think about the hierarchy of needs, right? Hierarchy of information needs, and we'll call them that. And so Broder came out with the simplest ones. He said that, well, there's navigational needs, right? And so I need to go somewhere in this information space. And that's not really that suited to generative AI kind of tasks because it can't really generate, it just has to recall from memory where you should go. Then we have informational ones, which is like, I just need to find something out about something. And again, we're in that sort of space where maybe it's synthesizing the answers, like it already points out, like that's pretty reasonable. But of course, if you want to dig into things, you'll have to go and visit the sources. And then we can think about the transactional ones. Now, obviously, generative AI can't necessarily do that because it needs to link into all these toolings. So, I mean, it depends on where we draw the line and what we think generative AI is, but it can't generate a transaction for you. That would probably be fraud, right? But then you can think about these higher order tasks, like organizational, and it did say that it could do that. And I think there's a lot of tasks that we have which are taking lots of information out there, bringing that together, and then organizing it in that space. Right, like just think thematic analysis. Imagine being able to do a thematic analysis on all your survey data or your qualitative data and it organizing, grouping, and presenting that to you, for you. That would be awesome, right? Because how long does that take in a normal study? Yeah, weeks. Do that in what is it, tag everything, code it, then analyze it. But then, then there's the higher order ones, right? Where you think, well, more evaluative. I don't think that's a word, but it fits into the scheme of things, where I actually want the system to generate ratings, and we're seeing that come into play, right? And then you can do that en masse, and Nick's talk was a good example of that, where you can just make a very well-constructed prompt, and you can get the system to generate or evaluate things for you. The next one would be decisional, and we talked about like that kind of task or need within the context of professional search, professional searches. That would be like patent lawyers or systematic reviewers and so forth. And then there was a Trek task on decisional based on should I use this to treat X? And so should I take my kid to the hospital? These are important decisions that we have to make, and we use search engines to find information to try and scare us, as Ryen would say, act us into going to the hospital and making more money for the medical system. But hey, I feel good when I go to the hospital, it's better than thinking my kid's going to die, right? So, can we get the generative AI to help us facilitate or make these decisions, but then where's the responsibility coming into play, right? If it makes a decision for us and I accept its decision, whose fault is it? But then I think we have the more fun ones, right? Which is the creational aspect, getting it to generate or produce something and produce something new from the space, right? There's all this information out there, right? Well, that's out there. And you think about organizational is more it's synthesizing stuff that already exists, that's grounded. But now take that grounded and then take one step forward, like inferring from the data we have. Think Chandra's work, right, on the tables, and we ask the question, could you get it to generate a new table of results that maybe I could slip by the FDA for approval for my, new drug, right? As long as we put enough daggers and stars and significant differences, right, it could be there. But then there's the imaginational tasks, right? And this is the hallucinations, where you get something that no one ever thought about. Like if I took a chicken and I added it to an IR system, what would I get? I don't know, man.
An imagination.
Yeah.
What would that look like? It'd probably look like a generative AI LLM, right?
All right, well, thank you for that image, Leif. Yeah, okay.
Guys, please stop giving him.
So let me move us on to another question, and this is one that I think is really relevant to this crowd. And again, my memory is going to escape me, but some number of years before the pandemic, Ryen, you guys hosted a task workshop up here after one of the Microsoft events, and representation was a big part of that. How do we represent tasks so that systems can help users? And so I want to ask the panel, do LLMs magically solve the task representation problem for us, or do we still have to figure out ways to represent tasks so that LLMs are going to be able to support users?
Well, they do represent the request that the user has made. But other than that, like the information that is hidden somewhere in the thing that the user has not said, certainly is not represented, and therefore, because there is that gap, it may be hallucinated, because that gap is not filled and it's not specified. So the question is, like, how do you work with an underspecified task?
Right.
And of course, in the same, I'm sure in the same workshop, things came up where, well, then you have to ask clarification questions to improve that specification, and at the same time to lower the burden on users, so not to make it like, if you ask me like 100 things about how to do this thing, then I better do it myself.
Right.
Right. So there is that trade-off. And again, the context representation, I don't think is like a solved problem, but there is ongoing work, especially like in this building, on adaptive alignment and creating, adapting the context and personalizing it such that the task is well represented.
Do we need more than just the textual history of the conversation that we've had with the chatbot so far? Do we need different kinds of structure there?
I think it would help to have more structure. So one thing that I'm wondering is there a difference between task representation and prompt engineering? Is representing task just about engineering prompts and putting all the structural elements there? So possibly decomposing tasks into subtasks, providing context, but it's difficult. We know it's not a solved problem. And how do we do this in an interactive context? I think one difference with search engines is that there is definitely here an opportunity to provide more aspectual information to the large language models, and it should help them to provide better answers and maybe then engage in a dialogue with us, which we couldn't do with search engines. So we could talk about user needs, user context, user goals. Again, how to express them is not necessarily easy and not necessarily solved solution. Another question is, how do we make users provide all this information? Do we do this through appropriate interface design or through a range of steps in a dialogue? But then are we back to, a reference interview with a librarian? Or is it really something new? I think we know that providing all this information will be helpful for the overall process, but I don't think that we know how to do this.
Leif, you make us all nervous when you smile like that.
I'm sorry. So, just following on from what Besmira was saying and Jacek as well, there is, if we have to express the task and all the subtasks, then, and this creates like this, and then you might as well just do it yourself. But if you just ask the system to do something and then it does something and which doesn't align with what you were thinking, then you have to go through this iterative approach of re-engineering and prompting and stuff. And I think this is where the value of these systems start becoming through, is when they can afford a certain level of personalization. And Nick's already written about this in his theoretical framework for conversational search and sort of touched upon a little bit of personalization today, which was it needs to kind of remember who you are and your context and your parts of your history. So when you say to it, this is what I mean when I say do this task. I mean do X, Y, and Z. So summarize my emails. And when I want you to summarize my emails, I don't mean every single email I get. I mean the ones that are the most important. And what's important to me? Well, what's important to me are the ones that are addressed directly to me that I have to respond to today, right? They're time critical. And then the way I want you to, group them or rank them by some type of priority about so-and-so is my boss, so they're the ones should always come first, and this is the project I'm mainly responsible for, so this is the next ones, and so on and so forth. But if I had to say that every single time to the system, it'd just be too burdensome. So we certainly do need a better way to represent task and all those subtasks and a better understanding of it. But we also need to be more mindful that actually unpacking what we mean when we say to do a task to someone else is actually really difficult, right? When they say, like when you become an expert in any particular field, the biggest difference I've noticed when you talk to just a normal language model, like a human, what type of language models are we? What's a biological language model, a BLLM, right? Is that an amazing expert will be able to unpack step by step the different things that you need to go to. When I say issue a job, organise a conference, Fernando, then I have an expectation of what the steps are to organise a conference. Fernando may have a different set of steps, right? If I think I have to explain them to him, like I'll have to explain to an artificial LLM, then that's kind of the difference we're at in terms of unpacking and representing those tasks and breaking them down, and then sharing that context between the system and it not forgetting that over time. So then it can actually be useful, because when we go to do the same thing again, and Chirag organises a conference, he'll do the same steps that I expect.
I'm hearing you guys talk a lot about needing to capture context, needing to capture that history, needing to know personalized settings of users, and those are things that LLMs don't seem to do right now.
Well, mostly they also do not have access to that information. But even if we were to provide that information, there may be still problems that remain unsolved even in that case. I'll give one example just because this is top of mind right now, and it is a very simple retrieval task, going back to the librarian example that you were mentioning earlier. Try it out, ask the GPT-4, give me a list of papers from a certain author, can be a famous author, can be yourself, that has a human name in the title. That's it, right? So you have two constraints. You have the author and you have the fact that the title needs to have a human name. And when you run large-scale experiments with this kind of task, even if you give the perfect context to the model, like all the list of research papers written by the author, it still is not able to satisfy many of these constraints. And of course it varies, on the constraint type, if it is an entity, if it is more lexical on the string level, and if it requires counting or it doesn't. And even in that case, models are not able to run that particular query. And if you think about it, this brings us back to 1960 or 1950. When we invented SQL and SQL queries, we knew exactly how to run this query.
Right.
Now we don't with these models. And so the perfect context, I'm just saying, may not solve every type of capability. And on top of that, the context may never be perfect. For a very similar query, if you ask, for instance, Bing, give me 5 ice cream shops in Redmond. Last time I ran this, and I don't know if this is true anymore, 3 of them are not in Redmond. but it says they are in Redmond. And the reason why that happens is because it does a search on Yelp. If you search on Yelp, ice cream shops in Redmond, it's going to give you the ones that are actually in Redmond and the ones that are like, in the locality. And then when somehow it summarizes and it brings it back to Bing, it's not in Redmond anymore. Because maybe it was chopped out.
So for that exact problem, I've always thought about that as being a very solvable in the near-term future problem. We know that LLMs hallucinate things about location or sources. We can just develop another module that goes in and verifies or checks that, okay? But is that really feasible for everything?
Yeah, that's the main question. Yeah, can we verify everything? Yeah.
A state agent seems to do the same kind of hallucination as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Not about ice cream trucks, but they say the better postcode, right? Yeah.
Intentionally or not intentionally?
Oh, intentionally.
Sometimes
so they say when a good area is near a bad area, they'll say that the house is in the good area, right?
All right, I'm going to ask the panel one more question, and then I'm going to throw it open to you guys because I want some more interactivity here. To me, this is one of the most interesting ones, I think. I hope you guys have insights because I don't. So co-pilots are here and coming. We're integrating these technologies into our workflows more and more. And yet, the transparency is often not there. And the tools that we are accustomed to using for assessing the quality of information, the source, even just a title of where it came from, anything that we might use from a traditional SERP to assess the quality of the information is being hidden from us or is not available even, right? And so how do we create tools that are going to be effective for people to use in their workflows without compromising that ability for people to critically assess the information and its sources?
We're looking to you because this is a very human sentence.
Feel free.
I just say, I wish I knew the answer. No? Maybe in 5 years from now. I think this is extremely hard because we don't really know what's happening inside these models. And maybe in some, really like 5 years or more, we will have better insights. So I asked ChatGPT if it can provide provenance, and of course it says no. I asked Bard if it can provide provenance, and the answer was yes. I
just use Bard then.
Yeah, and can we trust it? I don't, that's a tough problem. Insights.
Well, I think we have to also consider what we mean by generative AI, and obviously one is a large language model, and then the other one is we've got some other packaging around it. When you go to say Bing Chat, you have now the LLM, but it's also a RAG, so it's doing retrieval in this process and doing the provenancing for you, right? And then now we can imagine there'll be like greater packaging around these services more and more, and then there's the responsible components and the rules that they're placed upon. And then there's obviously checking about that. So we're talking about like larger pieces of infrastructure in this process about what it can and cannot do and what it can provenance and what it can't provenance, right? Is that just an affordance then?
So you're talking about combining other technologies other than...
Yeah, we don't just interact with the LLM, right? You could, right? But would that be sensible? Or responsible?
Well, definitely. If we talk about information provenance, we cannot consider it as a generational task. Like by definition, it's not a generational task. So that said, maybe we should. We can use it for other things, but not for information provenance.
Okay. This is good. We're getting. So is that incredibly problematic in the space of information retrieval? If we can't provide provenance?
Or worse, if we provide the
Or if
wrong
we provide the wrong
provenance.
provenance.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on, like, how, what sort of principles you want to hold the system to, or how hold its accountability to. Now, if it's just an artificial LLM and we're a biological LLM, shouldn't we hold ourselves to the same principles and same accountability? And so
Great
often
question.
we see like a news article, and I don't see any references in those. I see like blog posts, and it's just someone saying something. Should we believe those?
Actually, for work on fake news and topics of a similar, when they build simple classification models to see if an article is fake or not, one of the main features that comes up is actually, does it have any citations? Does it have citations, authorship, date, and affiliation of the author? So yeah, if it doesn't have any citations,
yeah, but if you're a good fake news generator, you create other pages which you then cite for your sources,
Yes.
right? It's just
yes.
I've always claimed to be a science fiction writer. Yes.
And yet you chose science as a profession.
Yes.
She can pick.
Yes.
I think these are good questions, right? I mean, if a generative AI system that's being used in the context of an IR system cannot provide its sources, cannot provide the provenance of the information that it's giving to us, is that a responsible use of the language model? I told you we'd get to the controversial part.
Well, the thing is here, what we think is responsible and what is happening in practice. In that, when we started working on these queries, like ice cream shop in Redmond, I mean, of course, the main question here is like, well, is it a question you should ask GPT-4? Like, why would you ask it to a model? And I agree, right? Like, maybe we shouldn't. But in practice, people are doing it every day. And no matter how many disclaimers you put out there, you cannot stop people from asking these questions. And the reason why that happens really is because you run some queries, you see that for some of them, it sort of gets it right. And for all users, including ourselves, you get excited. You're like, oh, it can do it. Like 1 example, 2 examples, it can do it. And then you stop checking. So no matter how many disclaimers you're going to put out there, you still kind of have to think what happens when the model answers these questions.
So this is exactly the behavior that I saw in a study I ran earlier this year, where people would assess the output of the generative AI, and if it sounded like things that they already knew, like maybe it listed 4 or 5 things, and they're like, well, I recognize 3 of those things, then they were more inclined to believe it, right? And it doesn't matter if those other 2 things were made up or not, because they recognized a couple of them. Yeah. All right, let's kick this open to you guys. We have our panel up here. This is the part where you guys get to ask the critical questions.
Can we start with students?
We could definitely start with students. I would love that. All right, so no faculty lab.
I was just wondering, do you think it would be like a major concern that people might start thinking of ChatGPT and similar generative AI as like individual like beings, like maybe not entirely sentient? Because I noticed like even though I am aware that it's not like sentient, but when I was testing like the new feature on the app, like the voice conversation with ChatGPT, I was actually getting social anxiety from talking to it. And I know it's not conscious, but I didn't want to embarrass myself in the conversation with it. And that effect still gets to me. So I was wondering, how would that play into like elderly population who don't understand the technology behind it, or like children who grow up asking questions without like comprehending that it is like an algorithm, not a living sentient being?
Great question.
Yeah, that's really good. I think the one of the really surprising things about the large language model revolution was the emergence of this perceived intelligence, right? It seemed like it had emotions. It seems like it has intelligence when you're interacting with it. And, you can start attributing these different properties to it, right? Just as, and now you start liking it. I remember like in Sikkim, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, they presented Shao Ice. I think it was from it was either Microsoft or Hawaii, yeah. And people were actually having very, very deep connections with the bot, and saying goodnight to it, and it saying, oh, you go to sleep early, and oh, you take such good care of me, Shao Ice, and stuff like that, right? And there's a whole there's a whole bunch of startups going, we're going to create virtual boyfriends and girlfriends for people, right? Because it simulates that, right? And in that space with generative AI, it's probably going to start telling you stuff you want to hear to keep you, involved in that relationship, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? So it's really scary. So it's not even informational now; it's emotional information, right? That it's communicating. Just having someone there for you, or feeling that someone is there for you, right? It's going to change.
Leif, now I'm wondering what I would have to do to make my virtual AI girlfriend break up with me. How bad would I have to offend her?
Stop paying.
Turn off the power.
Oh, but they're going further than just virtual.
I don't want to. All right. Next question. Yeah.
I want to ask a question related to task automation, Copilot, and the abuse of large language model. So I noticed a lot of developers, they like to use or improve the task automation, so they use one single prompt to complete a very complex task. But I think, I think we have already mentioned it, the important thing about task is a user can learn from the task. So I think Copilot probably can help users to learn or dive into the task step by step. But from my experience, when I use Copilot, I feel the function, use the tab key, and it can help me auto-complete the rest of the field. I really enjoy this function. Although I cannot always use tab to complete all the rest of.
You can't just hit tab.
Yeah, but I think probably in the near future, this function will be very much improved, and some simple things can be completed by just clicking the tabs. So I wonder if user will become lazier when they use Copilot, just using the tab key, and make the task become something like task automation, which I think will become an abuse of large language models. So how do you think they will become a problem?
Can I ask you a follow-up question? Have you gotten to the point yet where you feel disappointed when you can't press tab? Because I have. I've had this happen a couple times recently where I want to hit tab, and I'm like, oh wait, that's not what I would have said. Does that ever happen? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there is to say that currently, the intelligence or the capabilities are local to the document that you are constructing. So if in that sense, locally pressing tab is perhaps, not such a bad thing, in that, you are always in the same screen. Like from a UI perspective, you see the things that are happening in front of you. So maybe it's okay for the user to kind of check, and as long as the user checks, maybe it's okay. What is really worrying is pressing tab and not knowing what happens behind that. What are the tools that it's collecting? If there is, is it deleting all my other coding files? Is it updating them? What is it that is happening that I am not seeing? And that is even, I don't know if I would call it abuse, but misuse of the technology, and removing human agency from that workflow.
sort of following on from your question and that idea, I was getting like anxiety from using Copilot in GitHub's Copilot, and you know, I don't know whether I was pressing tab, but certainly it was spinning out what I should do next, and it was so scary that I was like going, why am I even sitting here? It seems to be doing everything for me. Right? And it's like one of those really scary, like, oh, the machines are going to take over, right? sort of moment that you have, and it's like, oh, what's my job role going to be going forward? But and that sort of leads to this thing where, you know, you're pressing tab and it's producing all the different code there, and then the naive acceptance of what it's doing, like then it, you know, okay, this is what you want to do, and here's how you do it, and then this is what you want to do next, and this is how you do it, can lead to really, really dangerous outcomes, but still having this perceived human supervision, because the novice programmer can seem like an expert when using the AI in Copilot, like on a GitHub one, right? But it often can lead to very, very dangerous outcomes because they don't really know or understand what the lines of code they're executing are doing in that space, which is this sort of, you know, lack of critical thinking skills that we're maybe creating, is like people stop scrutinizing the information they're looking at because of the trust bias that they've built up. 3 out of 4, that sounds pretty good to me. And Meatloaf only needed 2 out of 3, so for that. So it's a kind of scary space. But we also had these same arguments many years ago with expert systems when they were coming through, and the initial wave and revolution of AI was that the experts would start to be de-skilled by the AI, because the AI could do pretty much all the routine and rote things that practitioners were generally doing, and then they'd only leave all the hard things for the practitioners. But they kind of were thinking, oh, the practitioner actually needs to do many of these rote things to keep their skills in tune and in touch, right? And that never really materialized. So I think but there is that gap, right, where we have to be more mindful of people without expertise using the tools. I feel like a 10x developer when I have GitHub AI helping me do it right. But I kind of can work out what it's doing and know when it's not doing the right thing, and explaining to it how it can refine things. But in the hands of a novice, it's going to be super dangerous, and I think that's where we need more people making users responsible. Because if you give someone a hammer and they have a screw, what do they do?
All right. Yeah, Ryen. Yeah.
Normally don't ask questions, but okay.
Really?
First time, long time listener, first time. So I really like the discussion on task and the context there, and to me it sounded like you gave the answer. So to me, it sounded like Jacek proved that if you have this long series of things being spouted at you, you don't like it. I was sitting next to Rajesh Hank once, and he said, listening to a lecture, and he said, once you started teaching, you don't want people talking at you. You want to be talking at them. Sure, I understand that. Okay, but I think then the answer is, what is, how do you, and then if you look at the structure of the panel, Rob didn't give you all the instructions in the beginning, say, you have to answer in a clear and measured tone. I want some controversy. He didn't tell you, he didn't talk to you for 15 minutes before you do that. So what you want is clearly,
I did for Leif.
Okay, I have to say this. So he's been completely conditioned. So what you want is turn taking. You want hierarchical. You suggested hierarchical. You know, when you have a task, you don't, dump everything on them. You'd say, okay, I'm giving it to you at high level, and I'll break it up for you if you want. Okay. Then you gave the example of, I don't want everything, summarize all my mail doesn't mean summarize all my mail. You want the system to come back and ask you. So it's turn taking, mixed initiative, trying to get explanations when you need it. and clarify it as you go kind of an interaction. And today we don't have that with any of these systems. And today that's what is, it seems to me extremely crazy that we have this system where we spout a whole lot of nonsense and then look at the results and then come up with vague magical incantations like, if you say things like, first think before you do, then you get better results than if you do it the other way around. So to me, today it's black magic, and what we need is science. And calling it prompt engineering to me is really irritating because, nothing against you, but to me, it's not engineering. It's bloody hidden mess. Sorry.
What's the way? do you feel better now?
For me, I think the answer is we need systems with. Do you have any reactions to that? And by the way, I never imagined I was supposed to say cook up tables to give the FDA as an answer to your question. You continually surprise me, sir.
Vanessa?
We have all this focus on conversational systems and chatbots. Is that the right way to go? Because, we used to have, when search started, when we had the first search engines for general population, and people were typing in these long, full questions, very quickly they went down to 2 words. And when we type chat conversations, like, back and forth, like on WhatsApp, people very quickly found short abbreviations for the full sentences they wanted. Do we really want conversation about all of these things? I don't actually want to talk to the search engine about what I need. I just want to type in my words and get my results. Is this the right focus?
Maybe you haven't met the right search conversational bot, right? Like sometimes, they need to warm you up and get you involved, get you emotionally But yeah, I think it's a good point, right?
I think that the real benefit is this emotional connection. Like that is an area where it sounds like a detriment, but like if you were an elderly person and you were living alone, that might be your lifeline. That might be the thing that gives you comfort, whether it's a human or not. If it gives you comfort, maybe it's a good thing, right? So maybe that's.
So what would you rather have in a sense? Short questions?
No, I think that I don't know. I mean, I just
Go
think
back
that,
to the keyword.
Well, one thing is I don't think people want to type anything, so it probably needs to be.
What about speaking?
Yeah, if it was spoken, then it would need to be back and forth like we're having now. Because when somebody like me goes on and on and on, as I am right now, people are kind of like, oh, what? Right? So you want it to be a back and forth and a brief thing and sort of natural.
You want back and forth though.
Yes, but you also want it to be quick. Like I don't, even if I go into a store to make a purchase or something,
No.
I don't want a long conversation with any salesperson. I really think walk into the place and I get the thing and that's it, right? So.
It will, again, it depends on what the user is trying to achieve. Like in many cases, you just wanted to read your mind, right? Not even say anything. Like, I want this done in the code and don't make me write 2 sentences about it. Like, I just want to change whatever, like the ticks in the graph, that's it. But in other cases, the thing that you want to say needs specification, and that specification is hard in other ways. But going back, to the emotional attachment to these agents, I think there is it's a very difficult area in the sense that, of course, if it provides value for people, then maybe it's okay. But we didn't plan this. It's not that we had a bunch of therapists and people that know what they're doing to train these models. This is just coming out from whatever is out there on the internet. And we cannot anticipate what are the harms and the values that are coming from that. And if it is not planned, I guess there is a lot of anxiety of the type of value that it's going to provide.
Do we need regulation on that?
Certainly, but the way how we are having the conversation today in AI and on social media, it's basically the opposite of that. In that, you see a lot of conversations saying that, well, this is going to be great. AI is going to be your next therapist. And
it's not licensed, though, right?
Right. So you cannot do that as a human. You cannot do that.
Yeah.
It would be,
All right, Leif, a short answer because you were shaking your head.
Oh no, it's just more a free market kind of person. So the less regulation, the better. But it's not to say that we don't need some kind of responsibility.
Yeah. I would like to give one more question, but I'm looking at Shrug and
I think we can
Ryen.
afford a little bit more
A
time.
little bit more time. Okay. So you've had your hand up for a long
I just
time.
wanted to volunteer real quick that if you look at generative search systems that are out there, small startups, Perplexity AI, U.com, Find.com, they all have suggested searches and they're generally very short. They're not showing off the capabilities of the system in the suggested searches.
So you're saying that people learn on their own to get lengthier?
No, I'm saying perhaps that the companies are thinking that users are engaging when they're suggested searches or when they are suggesting shorter searches to the users to demonstrate. So Perplexity AI is not showing off the strengths of the model by suggesting a bunch of fairly lengthy example queries. They're all very short queries. ChatGPT as well, if you open it up fresh, it's a very short query. I don't know what that says about the actual capabilities or what users really want, but at least in this moment, there's...
So it's interesting because, again, I did a very small scale user study earlier this year where I did find that people were running longer queries to the chat system, which is as I would expect. And for many years in the interactive IR community, we've been trying to get users to enter longer queries than 2.8 words, right? And so, but maybe some users don't want to do that, right? So.
But it may be that they're showing those as kind of prompts, but behind the hood, there's actually a longer query in play. It's just that we can infer what that query may mean. And then you can actually show more if you have shorter keywords as well.
We need mind readers, and pretty soon we may have electrodes in our brains.
Oh yeah, the Neuralink.
Neuralink.
Don't make me think critically.
That's the other millionaire. It's not the Alexa millionaire, it's the other one.
All right, so we have time for one more question over on this side.
No, I'm just going to, actually there's a couple of them, but one of them, I want to go back to regulation. We don't really care as a society about that. We didn't do it with the social media. Our children are suffering, there's depression is high. It seems like the same thing 10, 15 years ago when all the CEO came, it's like, okay, this is harmless, we got to do something, and the money walks away. Same thing is coming now. We have no idea, and in society, we don't care. We think the social media got in our election. We didn't care a lot about it either. We didn't do our regulation. When there's a lot of these companies do something harmful, we give them a slap on the hand. I guess if the parking ticket is 25 cents and it's worth parking over $100, I'll just park over there, get a 25 cents ticket. That's what you're doing. I mean, and it is important. And the regulation, I have a daughter, and I'm sure you have a sister and daughter. So, yes.
I mean, like, or you can think, I'm a parent and I will not let my child go into those platforms, right? You know, there's also, you know, responsibility that side too.
So now the responsibility
But
is...
the responsibility shouldn't be on you, though, as a user.
So what, like, but we live in a world where we have to take responsibility. Well, I guess we don't have to take responsibility. We can just say, the government, everybody should, you know, look after me and do that and think for me and everything. Or I can go the other way around and go, actually, I do have a choice. I can think and I can like take responsibility things for my own actions and the actions of my, you know, the people that I look after as well.
Everybody understands that.
So the company don't have.
So that's what we should be empowering people to think critically, right, and to realize the impact of their actions and so on.
Define the company's responsibility.
I mean, what type of regulation would you propose on social media, for instance, that children aren't allowed to use it? And I'm pretty sure that's on most of them already, right?
No, you can use social media at a certain age. If you notice that the suicide is high among the children, the women are suffering. The election obviously got involved through this. True or not that we are saying that one. So your opinion, do you think should we do something about that?
Yes.
Okay.
Don't let our kids use social media.
And then how about the election? Is
Don't
the
let them
company
vote.
is responsible?
Especially if they've seen social media.
Okay, thank you.
I am just having a bit of fun.
No, but to have a more positive note, though, there are things that can be done in the sense that, like, when OpenAI was actually training on private data in the chat, there was an initiative in Europe to stop using the system, and unless that issue was mitigated, and actually it stopped being served in the country, and then once it was mitigated, then it came back. So things can be done, yeah, but not, perhaps, not in the whole complexity of them. So this is not to say that we should be demotivated and just not ask anything from the companies. We should be asking, and the responsibility is not only on us, is also on us, but not only on us.
Rob said to be controversial.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are doing great. All right, I had two more hands that I saw, Fernando and just Fernando.
Which hand?
I can say two things. Just as far as regulation is concerned, I mean, the way I see it, regulation with respect to a lot of what's going on in the internet and in tech is about where we were with, say, food or restaurant regulation or building regulation before they existed, right? We have those things in place now. We have accessibility rules. We have standards for kitchens. That doesn't exist right now. It's Wild West for AI and for social media. It's coming. It has to come because unrestrained, yeah, you can say you're going to go to that restaurant, you're going to die. That's on you. That's probably not a good policy as a society. So, yeah. Just my mind around it.
All right, very last comment, then we're going to stop.
And one more point related to regulation. In some cases, it can be a double-edged sword because, for example, related to copyright, there was no regulation when you pre-train your language models or your diffusion models on the whole web. And OpenAI pretty much used a ton of copyrighted information to train their models. And if regulation comes and bans, for example, the usage of copyrighted content to train this type of models, how new companies are going to compete with OpenAI that already gets this competitive advantage?
They shouldn't. OpenAI should take down the model. So, that's it.
So what if they did this, right? If I used a language model to generate a new article that cites the copyrighted material but is new, can I then use that new article?
But that's what we do every day. That's what we do every day. We write papers, we cite others.
Exactly. So I could basically go through and just generate all my own content, they could pay the 1 cent for accessing all those items or whatever it is. And now they have all these second-order documents which they have created, and they have all the provenancing to the actual information. And then if they use that to generate their model, is that okay then?
Well, but I think one of the issues is that when you write that article, you presumably cite that source.
Yeah, they can cite the source. They can create a new web page which then cites those sources, right?
But they don't.
They could. I was just saying, what if they did that? Is that okay?
Well, that's not my understanding of how large language models work.
No, no, I'm just saying, that's because I'm going, what if they did this? Would that be okay? That's not what they're doing, okay. I agree.
All right, well, we seem to have achieved the controversy by the end, so I'm happy about that. I want to thank all the panelists for their time and responses. Thank all of you for your questions.